Professor Young, 212, the accounting director. There's a good story about him and one of our former students in honors accounting, Tian Chi. And Tian Chi was he's kind of a loner in the group, but he was always really smart. So one time, Tian Chi, with no papers or anything, he went up to the board and he just kind of flipped open his book and looked at the book, glanced out, thought about it for a second, and just started nailing incentive contracting problems. And he was perfect, and I think he had numbers to the decimal, and everyone applauded, and everyone was like, God, how did he do that? Well, it turns out 2 days later, when we flipped through his book, he had the answers written down. Everyone was just, they were just petrified.
I was totally intimidated by Professor Young. Well, I remember one time Tim and I had to present, and so we got up in front of the class drawing a blank, and Tim and I weren't saying anything, and it looked like we didn't know what we were talking about. So I remember going to his office hours like a couple days later, and I pulled out my Dembski book and I'm like, look, this is what I drew. He's like, well, why didn't you just say that? I'm like, I said it's in the book, I don't know what you're talking about. He really actually wanted people to come in and ask questions, and that's something you learn pretty quickly.
So when I look back on my time that I've spent in the honors accounting program, I like to think I've done a pretty good job. I'm pretty proud of myself. But I always like to look back on my humble beginning, how I started managerial accounting with Professor Young. Before that class started, I was pretty intimidated by Professor Young. I'd only met him a couple of times. Really wanted to impress him. So I had gotten an email from him about his class, probably a couple weeks before it started. And so fast forward to the night before his class begins. Hang out with my roommates. We're celebrating the end of our break. I may have had a few carbonated beverages. I decided to check my email before I go to sleep. It's about 12:30, and I had class at 9:30 a.m. the next day, so I was planning on getting up early. And I see that email flagged, I open it up and find out that we have a homework assignment due. So naturally, I had a panic attack, whipped out my book, started trying to read it. Words were kind of blurring together in my head. I wasn't really understanding it very well, so I whipped out my trusty highlighter, started highlighting things like a madman, hoping it would make me understand it better. When I looked at it the next day, none of it was useful information at all. It was actually pretty random. Somehow I got the homework assignment done, turned it in, and saved face.
I think most people would say I was the teacher's pet in Coach's class.
Everyone knows Steve's pretty much the best presenter in the group. Coach took a liking to this. He was very impressed by Steve. And it just so happened that Steve and I were always in the same group together in honors accounting. So one time after we did a presentation, on our feedback, it had glowing remarks, mainly about Steve. Steve always said, Steve, wonderful presenter, really took it up a notch. Jim, you didn't take away anything. Steve, you should really think about being a professor. You were just unbelievable, eloquent. Jim, good job.
I think Jim was a little bit salty about it, but Coach, he was a great teacher. One of the things that was awesome about Coach's class was that we really got into some of the technical accounting, whereas some of our other classes were more theoretical. Coach is also political. He's definitely opinionated, but he's always funny.
Trader's class is, as we all know, very challenging. Just one of the most It's one of the most challenging classes in the honors accounting program for many reasons. Professor Schrader's a very smart guy. He knows exactly what he's talking about, confident in his abilities, knows a lot. However, a lot of the times we don't.
You're always faced with uncertainty. Well, what was that? Trophy?
The heirloom?
Yeah, like entropy. Like what was
Entropy.
Entropy, yeah. That's the biggest takeaway for me.
I don't even know what entropy means.
I'm showing our book for honors accounting. This book is the golden book for us. I put on so many sticky notes. See, I take a closer. See, this is what we did for 520. All the linear algebra, weird matrices, like we never understand.
We had all those groups where we would try to get together and try to share answers and figure out what was going on, just at least a little bit. Like, it would be a victory, exactly. It'd be a victory if we even had the slightest.
Didn't have the slightest idea.
And if we could figure that out, that would be a triumph for the day. Quantum mechanics and teleportation, exactly. gone. We couldn't figure it out. It was all about the process too. Yeah, the struggle brought us all together. So
That's when we really started to form a bond.
Exactly.
I got a question on the final, and as everyone else, I didn't understand what was going on. I just couldn't follow the math. I don't have a math background or anything. Very open-ended questions. I basically said that I should have studied linear algebra. I should have studied more math and statistics. I should have taken all these courses earlier in my college career or in high school. And apparently, Professor Schrader likes creativity, and I got an A in the course.
And honesty. So that made one of us.
Zachy. Yeah, so Zachy taught my first accounting class, and I had no idea what accounting was, so I was a little nervous. And I remember walking in there the first day, and he just had jokes on jokes on jokes. And it made it so much more fun, and ultimately I think that's why I stuck with accounting.
The funniest professor ever, like I loved his accent.
Am I the only one who thinks he's like the character Borat?
He would like always like stop in the most random spots we'd be going through some big problem, and he would just stop and tell a story about, you know, how he was grocery shopping at Whole Foods and how he goes like every week and everything. He goes to a gym with like 80-year-old women and they hit on him, and you know, he tells his girlfriend about it, and you know, she's okay with it.
You know, we know like his favorite animal maybe like elephant, giraffe,
and
monkey, yeah, and 猴子、大象、长颈鹿 in class.
Very into food. He's very into Entourage. Hey, you guys watch that show Entourage? There's this guy named Eric. Everyone calls him E.
He's just a really funny guy, great person to introduce the honors accounting program to all of us.
Spires, the mustache, the man, the myth, the mustache. This one time I went to Jimmy John's, and I saw Professor Spires sitting there at one of the booths. And I said, "Hey, Professor Spires, what's up?" No response. So I thought maybe I just wasn't speaking loud enough. So I was like, "Hey, Professor Spires, what's up?" No response. He was just sitting there mumbling to himself, working on something. I walked over to him and I was like, "Professor Spires, hey!" And he looks up and he goes, "Oh, good afternoon. I was doing the Sudoku here."
What I remember Dr. Ravi, it's mainly about spreadsheet. So he talked about, hey, this is a spreadsheet that you will create it and you are going to charge your clients $400 an hour. And I think, wow, that's a lot.
We do a lot of cases, and he will play background music, violins, classic music, and jazz.
So we were doing a presentation in Ravi's class, and
This was back in like early 2012. And this was, when there was all this public outcry about Mitt Romney being like this jerk, businessman that takes everyone's money. And so they had like a Tax in the News thing, a current event about Mitt Romney. And afterwards, there was one brave person following that presentation who tested the waters and raised her hand.
Heather raised her hand, and Heather asked, "Who is Mitt Romney?" Fair question. I politely told her who it was, and didn't put too much emphasis on it. In my head, I was thinking that it was pretty prominent, but at the same time, we had followed politics a little bit more than the rest of us. It happened after class that we figured out that everybody was thinking the same thing as us is. Pretty sure. How did you not know that?
That was one of the funnier moments.
That was a fun one.
Professor Robbie's class was fun. I think it was good for us to do those Tax in the News presentations. Everyone made such a big deal about their group name. And because I know Kevin, they were like the Purple Pandas, and they're like the Ferocious with a P.
So Fellingham was one of those teachers that was really just concerned about you taking an interest in something and running after it. He's also a very nice guy. I would say a little bit more reserved than most of the other teachers, but very helpful and very into giving students, answers and trying to be nice about it, even though clearly he knows way more than any of us ever will. Come to class, he asks the same question every time. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share? Anything. Just anything. A question?
Tell us what you ate for breakfast.
Anything. And we were a reserved group of people. Sometimes we'd ask questions, but we didn't really put it on the spot that much. A lot of us started thinking in our heads, somebody has to do something. Somebody has to do a presentation. And it could be about anything. Tyler did a great one about code breaking. Bellingham's face just lit up after that one, and he just loved it. And,
I love that he was so quiet, but like in the outside world, he's like this badass like Harley biker guy that wears leather jackets and probably does like $120 down like 270 on his Harley. I imagine just screaming along the highway.
I would come home and talk to my roommates, and someone was I don't know, holding a bag of chips, and I was like, that UPC code, let me, I'm like 313131, I can tell you.
Dave, Professor Williams. So I remember running to my friend Rob Brewer. I told him, I was like, I actually have Dave Williams as a professor. And he's like, no way. Dave's son is like one of my best friends growing up. He's like, I spent a lot of time at Dave's house. I mean, this is since kindergarten. And he told me so much about you. And then just to come to your class, and you made me crack up every day. It was a great, enjoyable time.
Wall Street Journal, like every day, every morning. I don't really like keep up with news and stuff, so that class I think really taught us a lot to get a good night's sleep and to eat a healthy breakfast and all that stuff. But no, he was great.
Oh man, the best group in honors accounting.
Dana and Lisa,
Tyler and Jake,
Mike and Jeff,
Sarah and Tim, Rob and KD,
Joel Dembski and Professor Young.
I mean, but if I really had to
be 100% honest and completely unbiased, I would have to go with Steve and I.
My biggest takeaway from honors accounting was that the point isn't always to get the right answer, but that you have to think really hard.
Learning stuff.
My biggest takeaway from honors accounting, 2 subject matters, incentives and asymmetric information. Professor Young would joke about it, but you really do start to see it in everyday life, and there's really a lot of applications it does have.
Biggest takeaway. Critical thinking is important for life. Not so much it's things that you know that are going to help you, but it's being able to find out new things on the fly, which we did a lot of because none of us knew what we were doing for most of the time.
This picture with the big hairy monkey.
The big hairy monkey.
That's my favorite picture.
Like him just like rocking his phone, like.
Literally, my favorite professor I would say is.